Sadly, it seems like the honeymoon phase for Figuarts is over yet again. If you guys have been keeping up with the channel, you know that there was actually a period where I was kind of against Figuarts because I felt like the quality just wasn't there to match the price. Predominantly back in like 2018, 2019, when an awful lot of those Homecoming and Far From Home figures for that Spider-Man series were coming out. I just didn't think that they were all that great. They felt kind of bulbous and fragile. Swapping the hands out were a pain. Then I felt like they had a little bit of an upswing, like an adrenaline injection to get them just pumping, and kind of like Batman himself did in the Batman, and just starts wailing on products that actually hit the mark, like the Tobey Maguire No Way Home figure, or even the Andrew Garfield to some extent, though I would have appreciated an extra head because of the licensing issues. They couldn't do that, but at least other little qualities about the Andrew figure I ended up really liking. And even a couple things here and there. I didn't review it, but I actually have the Figuarts for the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness Doc Strange version, and I actually really did enjoy that one. So when they announced that they were doing their own take on the Michael Keaton Flash Batman figure, I thought to myself, you know what, that could actually be worthwhile. Little did I know that somewhere down the line, I don't know if they lost people in their department, I don't know if key members of those departments ended up quitting, or maybe it was something to do with inflation, something to do with the pandemic, even though we're already 3 years in. I don't know, but Jesus Christ, it's been a really good minute since I pulled out a Figuarts out of the box and then instantly kind of regretted it. I mean, you know it's bad when the first person I show this figure to outside of myself is my girlfriend, and even she was like, who's that? I mean, she was being sarcastic because obviously due to the way that the suit is designed and the overall kind of intention behind the figure, she did recognize that it was supposed to be, allegedly, supposed to be Michael Keaton in the Flash movie, the older version, but man, oh man. First of all, look at my hand and look at the figure. I understand that Figuarts is not necessarily aiming for the 6-inch scale, not necessarily striking for any static template of those general consumer figures like 6-inch for Marvel figures, or in the case of DC Multiverse, McFarlane toys, which go for the 7-inch scale. But I don't even think we even have 5 1/4 or 5 1/2. This is straight up just 5 inches. And when you take into consideration the sizing per the amount of money that you're spending, which thankfully I didn't spend all too much of a pretty penny. It's still a pretty expensive figure no matter how many ways you slice it. But I managed to import it directly from Japan via AmiAmi, so a little bit of the cost was kind of mitigated. It's the only trade-off is that you have to wait a good amount of time for it to come to the States. But if you were to pick it up from a retailer such as Big Bad Toy Store or Amazon or whatever the case may be from Western retailers within the States, you're looking at about 80 or 90 bucks. And so taking that price point into consideration, I feel like this is one of the few instances where Figuarts, I feel, is back to their old ways. One of them being the scale, and then the other would just have to be just the overall likeness and quality of the body itself. Sure, it's modeled to look after that modern suit that Michael Keaton decides to bring out after reluctantly helping not just Barry in the Flash movie, but the Flash movie in general by just appearing in it. And you can see the militaristic kind of take on that Burton-esque suit across the entirety of the chest area, the blackened out belt right here, of course the matted finish, which I really do appreciate, the actual texturing behind the limbs and the gauntlets and even the boots. It's just that when it comes to those proportions and the overall quality feel you feel in hand, it's like, it's going back to what I was mentioning before, what I was complaining about before, where it just feels very fragile and kind of weak, especially since, like I said, I know this is meant to be Keaton's Batman, but since then he's kind of learned the error of his ways as far as the mobility of his suit, so it's supposed to be a bit more on the flex side, a little bit more on the agile side. And not only does it feel pretty static and pretty, basic as far as not only, like I said, the presentation of the suit itself, but look at the head sculpts. That's probably the biggest crime that is at play here. Not only do you have these wonky little spikes here on the base side of the cowl, but then you'll notice that it's all completely one piece. Spoilers, there's no neck articulation. They literally went for accuracy here. Because it's SHFiguarts. Simple, detailing, heroic action, or whatever the hell. Well, there's not a whole lot of heroic action happening right here, because in order for him to turn his head in figure form, you literally have to do this. The classic Batman joke. And I get that. But just because it's accurate to the character doesn't mean that it needs to necessarily translate in figure form. It's like in video games where people are like, it's not realistic for there to be crates all over the place with supplies. Yeah, but I'm playing a video game, all right? I actually don't mind too much of the sculpting and the matte finish as far as that jet black kind of aesthetic. The likeness is completely lost. There's too much of a cone kind of design to the shape of his head that just looks like he's pouting, and it does not resemble Keaton's Batman whatsoever, even with the cowl on. Plus, the eyes look kind of sunken in, and the paint in terms of like the blackness around the eyes is kind of fading out, that it just doesn't look 100% there. And then they try to go for like a little bit of a stubble effect, but again, didn't really translate very well. And on top of the fact, you can't really move this thing is a completely a static piece. It just turned me off in just so many ways. The only real redeeming factor is just looking at the classic look of course, the yellow bat symbol there on his chest, which out of the box came a little crooked, and I was about to complain about that, but there's actually a hidden feature behind said symbol. Once you get, like I said, the rest of the suit, in terms of aesthetics, it's clean, it's fine, but it's over encumbered by the cape. You then see this cape right here, which is made out of this it's made out of the material you use for like cleaning your glasses. You know, the thing they use to kind of wipe away screens before you put on the screen protector, or you use to clean your glasses, the microfiber cloth or whatever. That's pretty much the material I have on hand here. So it does the job of kind of bringing this velvety look, and it is wired. If you couldn't already tell, you can actually have some wires here on the rims of the cape itself, as well as I think 2 wires, or at least 1 wire in the middle to kind of give it just a little bit of a breath of shape and life, to make it look kind of come alive, or make it seem like it's breathing or blowing in the wind. And you do have the classic bat trimming here towards the end. But 2 things. 1, it's dragging way too long. I feel like it's a little bit too long for the aesthetic that Keaton's often going for. And like I said, the trimmings around the shoulder area are just too broad that it just feels like it's covering either the entirety of the costume, or simply you just don't know exactly what to do with it. And it just accentuates these little spikes that he has going on the cowl right here, that it just makes his head look a little floaty. You see that happening right there? And yeah, I get it. You know, you're supposed to bring that Burton-esque kind of style to the overall bottom part of the cowl, but overall, this is just not the business. You know what also is not the business? The articulation. I already kind of spoiled one ahead of time. The head does not move whatsoever. My lord. But then you get to the top arms that are a little pressed down by the cape, so you are going to have to finagle the wiring that is happening here towards the top side, press it kind of towards the back, and then you expose the top arm joints. Unfortunately, Figuarts strikes again. I don't know if it's the way that it's designed. I don't know if it's my specific unit. You can't really rotate them vertically 360. I get a little bit of resistance, and I start to hear the little bit of squeakiness. And I know that some of you folks have already kind of come to the comments when I was reviewing the Across the Spider-Verse figures, or even that Toby figure that were from Figuarts, saying that if I was looking for some form of solution to that, I could just kind of pop off the joint, dip it in some like oil of some kind, or like, I don't know, I can't remember the exact solution, but it's very easy to find. And I understand that. But to me, that's like the Figuarts equivalent of people coming to the defense of Marvel Legends saying, oh, just dip it in boiling water, or, you know, pass it with the hairdryer to make sure that you unfreeze and unstick the joints out of the package. We should not be having to do that. I'm sorry. That extra step, and I'll still hold the top tier dogs in that regard. InArt with their rooted hair, we really shouldn't be spending an extra 1 or 2 hours when we take out those Joker heads out of the box, and I fear that J&D might be the next proponent of this, where we don't want to be going through the extra trouble of becoming a hairstylist for those rooted hair versions when we take out the head sculpt out of the box, and it looks like, you know, the dude is stressed the out. You know what I'm saying? Like, the hair is just all over the place, and you have to literally style it with like a comb and like a toothpick and some hot water, etc. Those extra steps should be on the burden of the manufacturer and the company, not us. That's why we're spending the money. So to have figures come with these kind of joints rant over, it's very, very disappointing. So mine just right off the bat can't really rotate. You can start to hear a little bit of clicking, but it's not ratcheted. It's simply just a stuck joint. So I don't know what's going on. I'll see if maybe I'll film a short or something, or maybe a community post kind of updating you guys on what's happening on the top arm joints for my FiguartS Batman. Nevertheless, though, you are technically able to still extend the arm that a ways, and it kind of feels like there's a little bit of a shrugging motion, slight butterfly motion happening. And when I do extend the arm, it can kind of sort of rotate towards the top. But again, I'm greeted with so much resistance that I can't really tell if it's the cape's fault or the joint or a combination of both. I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going on there. It gets even more disappointing when I realize that there's only one elbow joint that can technically swivel, almost forming or creating the illusion of a bicep swivel right on top of it. But in terms of bending, you only get one 90-degree angle, so he can only really bend the arm about that far up. Any further that I tried to press, and literally both forearms would come off the figure. They would just completely pop off, and they're very, very fragile. Thankfully, they didn't break. You can pop them back into place, but just having that happen frequently, more than any other recent FiguartS that I've covered, is incredibly disappointing. Nevertheless, you still have the ball joints on the wrist that allow the hand to rotate 360 degrees, as well as slightly bend inwards and outwards, except that mobility is also a little bit on the limited side, since his gauntlets are a little bit on the thicker side versus some other much more skin-tight characters' costumes. Now, surprisingly, the waist articulation is pretty good. You do have this slight mid-torso cut with all the little, angles that are happening right here to factor in the form and the shape of his actual suit. But at least it does a decent job of not only crunching inwards and outwards, but also slightly rotating towards the left and the right. It just can't do it all the way around, but you actually do get a decent amount of mobility, especially for how rigid of a guy he is, and also how dependent he's going to be on those joints in order to be able to look left and right because of his goddamn head. Slight nudging on the waist articulation, but it's mostly there for crunching, either oblique crunching side to side, as you can kind of see right there, and crunching forward and back, as you can see, proper back extension towards the front and towards the back. So that's actually a little bit more on the generous side. Now, when we get to the top leg joints, you'll notice that something is actually kind of missing. A bit of a FiguartS staple, if you will, and that's going to be that extra piece that kind of rotates in place to allow full mobility of the leg forwards and backs. So as such, that kind of tipped me off to a potential red flag, and I was more or less kind of right. You can actually extend the leg towards the front very easily, no problem, but no proper way to extend the leg towards the back. It can kind of nudge its way towards the back right there, but his ass sculpt is actually just one giant piece, unlike other FiguartS, especially the Spider-Man. Even Green Goblin had that extra piece that could technically allow it to extend the leg all the way to the back if it wasn't for the extra pieces on his utility belt. Batman doesn't even have that much hindrance, and yet for some reason they decided to full-on sculpt out the ass. And therefore, he's not able to extend the legs towards the back. Now, the left one can do it a little bit more, but that's because for some weird reason, you might have already seen it a couple of times here in the video, the left leg has a drop-down joint. But for some reason, the right one doesn't. I tried pulling it, I don't want to risk it, and as such, when you extend, it kind of feels, well, they're actually kind of both ending up in the same exact angle. So there is leg extension, except it doesn't do the full 90-degree angle. It kind of stops at about 45 degrees. But lo and behold, if you take a closer look at the inwards parts, another piece that I'm noticing is missing is that cylindrical piece that FiguartS generally have a tendency to have. And so that was another tip-off. And like I said, I know I'm kind of already jumping the gun here, even though we still get the fluid knee joints there, two joints that are fully able to bend the leg all the way up, right about right there. We then get our next red flag, which is going to be the ankles. Instead of a traditional FiguartS ball joint, we get just a simple kind of slide or whatever it is going on right here inside of the shoe that allows the shoe to barely move up and down as you see before you're there, and really not rotate because of how girthier that top ankle boot piece is. You can't really rotate it. You can't really do much. There you go. It kind of stops right about right there before it starts to squeak. And like I said, don't want to press my luck all too much. And slight pivoting from side to side. Right about right there. Yeah, there are toesies right there. But again, much like some figure arts that I've seen in the past, they don't really press all the way up like so. I kind of wish that there was a bit more mobility. All it is to say that there's so many things that break from figure arts tradition as far as the articulation, and this is the pride and joy of figure arts. It's in their slogan, heroic action. Well, how much action can I really do with this Batman if so many joints have been completely cut out of the entire ensemble, but even the head can't really rotate all the way around? It looks very gargantuan compared to the rest of his body. The proportions are just weird. It honestly makes me think that this was handled by a different team. And maybe figure arts stretched themselves a little too thin, especially with just so much content that was dropping within the past couple of years, and with so many licenses clearing as far as like the No Way Home stuff, and then Across the Spider-Verse had their wave with the Miles, the Gwen. We got a 2099 Miguel O'Hara dropping pretty soon. Then the Green Goblin finally came through, and now we got Keaton Batman, except it looks like B Team or even C Team managed to handle this guy. And as I kind of demonstrated here with the articulation, so many corners were cut that at the end of the day, I just feel kind of sour about him. So sour, in fact, that we gotta bring in what is arguably the more superior figure at literally, I almost don't even want to say half. If you do end up getting this in the States, you're probably looking at about a quarter of the price. And that is, of course, going to be the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse 7-inch Keaton Batman from the Flash movie. Look at this. Yeah, there are some inaccuracies on the suit for the McFarlane version. Specifically to me, the more egregious one would have to be the green tint on his boots. I've heard some people make up excuses. I'm sorry, I still, after having seen the movie, I can't remember exactly where that green tint came from. I legitimately cannot remember. But all that aside, the bat symbol, the proportions, even the likeness. I feel like I can see Keaton just a little bit more on the McFarlane than I do comparatively to figure arts. It's still not the most accurate likeness, sure. For something like that, look at Hot Toys or even Mayfix if they were ever to come out with their own. But at least, like I said, for the value, $20 with something that's a bit more solid, rigid, has way better articulation, still has a cloth cape that is a little easier to style. Sure, it may not be wired, may not favor certain static poses like it looks like it's blowing in the wind or doing anything dynamic, but just look at the proportions, just look at the detail, and then look at figure arts, which prize themselves in, like I said, heroic action and the look and quality and everything. And then I'm just thinking to myself, like, where do things go wrong, guys? If there was one edge that figure arts has over the McFarlane, would probably just be that little bit of matte finish. In terms of preference, I actually kind of like that a little bit better because it kind of borrows a little bit from that Burton-esque kind of aesthetic to mimic the bat skin that he had in the 89, or at the very least, Batman Returns. I feel like Batman Returns was a bit more smoother, and I feel like that's what this one is going for, as opposed to the slightly glossy McFarlane Toys. That's probably the only thing that I really wish I could just kind of meld the two together, would be the matted finish of the figure arts and maybe the lighter hue of yellow on the bat symbol, and then just bring those two elements on over to the McFarlane Toys, and we got probably our perfect McFarlane or a Michael Keaton Flash Batman figure, and maybe get rid of that green tint. But in terms of articulation, I've already covered this guy. You can find his separate review here on the channel, but to be completely blunt, you can kind of see exactly where things are going. You got double knees and double elbows, full torso articulation. You even have head articulation, even though, like I said, it kind of speaks to a slight inaccuracy, but it just does wonders for display purposes. The only other area that maybe figure arts can, like I said, get the edge would probably, and this is putting it incredibly mildly, would be accessories. Because McFarlane only threw in 2 extra set of hands, 2 fisted hands, along with the 2 holding hands that he already has on his person, a batarang, and a grapple. Now, both of them are coated in this like very easy chrome finish, and detail-wise, they're pretty adequate. You know, they get the job done, and that's pretty much what's included here. But still, like I said, it does the job. With figure arts, they still retain the trend of being able to throw in more than just 1 extra pair of hands. Along with the fisted hands that he comes with 2 additional semi-relaxed hands, I guess you could say. Much more frenetic open hands. 2 holding hands for one of his other accessories, specifically the batarang. And then 2 cylindrically holding hands. I'll comment on these in a little while, but basically he comes with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 total hands, 5 total pairs on him included in the bundle. And so that's not too bad of a package deal. But here's where things go a little awry. Not only do you get one Batarang, which is actually pretty well detailed. I actually do prefer the paint that is happening on this version because it's a bit more weathered. It's got kind of like this metallic brush finish as opposed to the very shiny chrome that McFarlane opted to do with theirs. So in terms of preference, yes, I actually do like the Figuarts one, but in terms of sculpting, it almost looks practically identical. So that's cool. What did they do for their grapple? Well, they didn't do a grapple. They instead just threw in another Batarang. Literally just 2 Batarangs. I'm like, all right, well, you could have used the plastic and the resources on that extra Batarang to give us a grapple, just like McFarlane did. So I don't know why they did that. And that's pretty much what the kind of slightly clenched holding hands are for, to hold either of the Batarangs if you want to go for like a double Batarang takedown pose or anything like that. As for those kind of like cylindrical hands that are shaped like this, well, that's because those are designed, and this is actually rather curious. It's kind of cool, but the figure's just, I feel like the figure didn't earn this, in my opinion, because of the quality of the core figure itself. I personally don't feel like the figure earned this. And that is these 2 plastic translucent rods. So basically what these are supposed to be, you're supposed to have the short end, which is kind of like this L shape right here. This end is supposed to go into those hands. And then the longer end, which is obviously going to be this part right here, is supposed to slide into this nice little nook that's kind of stitched into the ends of his cape. So you kind of see where I'm going with this. Basically, these rods are supposed to go in those little sleeves, those little holes or kind of like pipelines inside of the ends of his cape, and then his hands are supposed to hold the much thinner rims. I'm not going to do it for the posterity of the review, but you'll see in the B-roll that he's basically supposed to mimic that flying or gliding look that not only did he have in the 89 Batman when he's intimidating the enemies, his foes, but also in the Flash when he glides down to save Barry while he's puking. Basically, when he's supposed to kind of illustrate that full extended bat-like look. That's cool, but like I said, this is not necessarily a figure that I feel earned this. I would rather have taken, like I said, a grapple or some other form of gadget as opposed to this, because the cape was already a cumbrance to deal with. So interesting that they threw this in, a novel concept, points for trying, but it just doesn't feel earned for a subpar figure, especially when you decide to have this be your unmasked head. And there you have Michael Keaton himself in the unmasked version of Bruce Wayne. And though I respect the detail they tried to do for the gray hair and the skin tone, which is actually quite adequate, I kind of half see Keaton, especially with the eyes and the eyebrows, those very angular eyebrows he's got going. But he's got very distinct lips. We all know this. Michael Keaton has a very distinct smirk. I personally don't feel like they kind of tried to do something with it. And there's certain angles where the lighting does kind of look like it, but then there's others where it just doesn't. It just doesn't. It looks like his face is quite honestly melting. So I thought to myself, all right, well, again, they tried, and I guess in a matter of speaking, it's a bit more on the accurate side than the McFarlane. But at least with McFarlane, you just deal with his head. It's got his own neck articulation. You're fine. If you want to swap this out for this head, which this technically does have its own joint on the neck piece, on the unmasked neck piece, the exposed neck piece, to be able to rotate around. But not only is it very stuck, and you can hear it kind of squeaking in and of itself, but the process to get this thing swapped for the cowled head is a bitch. You have this extra neck piece that is supposed to basically go at the base like so. Like this, okay? And then you have these 2 pegs right here. These are supposed to hold the cape in place. You have to be juggling so many different things, from holding the cape into these pegs to have the neck piece go into a separate neck. It's this whole like apparatus in the detailed by the slightly, I don't want to say confusing. They're not really confusing, but I just wish that there would have been some extra pointers on the instructions. But I kind of got the gist. It's just a pain, you know. It's just not a very conductive thing to do. I did it like once, and I'll definitely do it again for the B-roll that you're about to witness. But otherwise, it's just not worth doing it so frequently. It's not going to feel like a thing that I want to do for posing, like, oh, I want to pose him with his unmasked Bruce Wayne head. I feel like, changing up the poses. No. Like later on in the future, I'm not going to want to put that head again. Maybe put it off here towards the side for, for, like I said, the novelty display factor. But outside of that, it is an excruciating chore to get these things swapped that I'd rather just leave that on. Plus, it never flushes right. Trying to press the bat symbol that you're supposed to pop off to get the cowl removed, to then pop this on and then pop the cowl back. The bat symbol back on. It never stays in place. The cape seems like it wants to like pop out and kind of undo itself. The bat symbol looks like it's about to go flying, no pun intended. Like I said, it's a pain. It's an overall chore that I just don't really feel like going through that process again. And that's not something you want to hear out of a SHFiguarts Batman figure. You're supposed to not only make it a convenient process, but also make me feel like I'm having fun playing with a Batman toy. And for a company who prides themselves in their articulation, their extra hand accessories, the detail, and all that crazy, premium stuff, how is it that a McFarlane Toys $20 Batman figure is able to deliver that in space and more, and still is considered to be a contender for me for figure or McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse figure of 2023 over here? That is just a phenomena that should probably be studied by multiple toy companies to make sure what not to do and what to do as far as Batman figures, but practically any kind of superhero figure in general. And it's one that saddens me, since now it looks like I'm probably going to have to take a break from SHFiguarts if this is a trend that they're going to be continuing to do. And it's because of that trend that, I got to be honest, I think I'm going to be giving this Flash Keaton Batman a 5 out of 10. Oh, man. Yeah, I'm probably going to be opening up Mercari or eBay here, seeing if anybody wants... Nah, I'm not gonna do that. I must carry this cross and kind of do it in the vein of creating this video to let you guys know exactly who comes out on top in this competition, or rather lack thereof competition, because it's no contest. McFarlane Toys. If you're still able to track down a McFarlane Toys Keaton Batman from the Flash, this is the definitive winner, which again still boggles my mind over a $70 to $80 or maybe even $90 SHFiguarts. But hopefully this serves as a really, really strong and tough love lesson for Figuarts going into the new year as far as what they need to do to make sure to bring back customers like me. Especially after dealing not just with him, but also Green Goblin. I know we got 2099 Miguel O'Hara, and being a Spider-Verse figure, I feel like maybe he'll fare a little better as far as caricature and accuracy, because they're not going for live action. So those figures have definitely been a bit better on the release side of 2023, but who knows? Well, we'll see when we'll tackle that review. But in the meantime, guys, if you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting the thumbs up button. If you still, however, want to pick up your own Figuarts Keaton Batman, there is going to be affiliate links in the description that you guys can use to help out the channel in the process and get your own, full disclaimer. But otherwise, I appreciate you for watching, and until next time, stay humble. I'll see you later.